Hey guys, welcome to Have the Best Morning. I'm your host, Jeremiah Emanuel, and we are kickstarting a whole week talking about your favorite 5-letter word, and that is money. Now, the reason I wanted to take time to talk about money, specifically this week, we're going to focus and zero in on the 4 types of giving outlined in the Bible. We're going to talk about tithing. We're going to talk about free will offerings. We're going to talk about almsgiving, and we're going to talk about first fruit offerings. And then we're going to spend the last part of this week talking about different financial testimonies. And so to kickstart this whole week off, talking about God's systems of money laid up in the Bible, there's no better place to start than the tithe. Why? Because there's a lot of different ideas and misnomers that people have about the tithe, but it's actually a very simple concept according to God's word. Literally, it's built into the word itself. The word tithe in the original Hebrew literally just means the tenth. The word tithe itself, even in English, means the tenth of something. So when we talk about the tithe, we are talking about the first 10% that's produced off of what you receive in. So if you make a paycheck and your paycheck is $100, the tithe on that would be, that's right, $10. And God makes it so simple. So no matter whether you're making 100 a week or you're making 1,000,000 a week, all he says to do, it's not a sliding scale based on your net income like, the US government does with your taxes. God says, no matter what you do, all that must be returned to me straight up is 10% of what you brought in. And so what I wanted to do today was talk about the tithe, how it originated, how it works, and share with you a powerful testimony of the principles of the tithe being put in action. So a lot of people say, well, brother, we don't have to tithe because we've been redeemed by grace and tithing is under the law. And to that person, I would tell you, you're absolutely wrong. Now, while the law that Moses gave did mandate the tithe, basically telling people they have to, the first instance we actually see in the Bible comes all the way back in Genesis in chapter 14, verses 18 through 20. Abraham is just whooped up on 5 different kings. He beat him with a handful of servants from his household. And it says what he did as his first act of worship to the Lord for the victory that he got was he gave a tithe of all of everything that he won in victory, all the spoil that he brought. It says that he gave it to a high priest named Melchizedek. And in response, Melchizedek gave a blessing over him and gave him bread and wine and gave him what would be the forerunner of communion. And so when Abraham gave a physical gift to the Lord, he received not only a blessing, but a spiritual assignment that's been given in according with that tithe. Why? Because the tithe is a sacrificial gift. Now, think about it this way. How many people out there, who aren't Christians, if they won a bunch of money, say in the lottery, or they get a big payday at work, they get a giant bonus for doing something out of the ordinary, how many of them would have the first thought to do something entrepreneurial with it? Some do, but most don't. What it does when we receive money as Christians, as believers, when we get our eyes and our heart on giving the tithe first, that keeps our heart connected to the Lord who increased us in the first place. That keeps your heart in the place of, Lord, there's no way I would have increased without you. Just like Abraham knew there was no way he was going to win a battle against 5 kingdoms with only 300 trained servants in his household and, not deduce that the Lord's on his side. So the Bible shows us the tithe never came from the law. It never came from Moses. It never came from David. It was all instituted by Abraham, who is our father in the faith through Jesus Christ. If you're a brand new believer, if you're operating in the new covenant through Jesus Christ, you are the seed of Abraham. And so you should do what Abraham does, honor the Lord with the tenth of your substance. Now, when you give the tithe, which again is just 10% of your gross income, what happens is there are 3 specific blessings you can count on that are unlocked with the tithe. They're outlined in Malachi 3:10 through 12. And what it says is this, is that if you will make sure there's meat in my house, this is the Lord speaking, I will open you up the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing you don't have room to contain. So that's blessing number one. Unfathomable riches and increase that come to you as a result of honoring the Lord first with your tithe of your substance. So he opens up the windows of heaven to pour you out a blessing you don't have room to receive. He rebukes the devourer for your sake, meaning anywhere the devil could try to encroach on you, not only do you have to fight that battle, not only do you know that that battle has already been won by the Lord, he goes ahead of you to take care of it. So the devil's not just able to come in and do whatever he wants to do. God stops him well ahead of his tracks in what he's trying to encroach on in your life and says, no, this person is a tither. You have no legal access to even their perimeter. You are not allowed around them. You have no access to them. Now, does that mean that the devil has to completely leave us alone? In terms of what the tithe produces, yes, but you still have to be mindful of your words, your thoughts, and your actions. That could still open the door for the enemy, but that's not what we're teaching on today. But what I will explain to you briefly is this: while the Lord takes care of the devourer, you can still leave the door open to him by way of what you're doing. So just make sure that you're speaking words, having thoughts, and filling thoughts in your mind from the Bible, and watching the actions that you undertake so they don't invite the devil give him any place in your life. Now, number three, aside from the windows of heaven being open for you and the devourer being rebuked, it says that all nations will call you blessed. It's an obvious blessing. People can see that the Lord's on your side. People can see God's given you momentum from what he's done as just a result of you honoring him with the tenth of your tithe, with you giving that tenth of your gross. And I want to share with you a powerful testimony of how this works. And it's not even one that comes out of the Bible or one that even comes out of a different church or even a church testimony talking about prosperity. This is from a farmer named Perry Hayden. Now, what Perry Hayden did right here in the United States of America is he heard in Sunday school about the tithe. And he said, you know what? If this tithe thing is real, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a patch of my farm and I'm going to dedicate these kernels of wheat as tithe. They're directed only for the Lord. I'm setting aside a tenth of what I received. Now, what Perry Hayden did was he started out in a 4x8 plot of land. He planted these kernels, and by the time that the growing season was over, it had expanded so much that it was well outside of that original 4x8 box and scope. As they kept going, it increased to being an acre, to being 10 acres, to being 100 acres, to the point that they repeated this experiment and kept it going for 7 different years, to the point where they had a national holiday coming to harvest Farmer Perry's crop. And even like Henry Ford came out and different things, they invented new combines just to be able to handle the volume of the harvest that came up as a result of those wholly set apart tithe kernels. And so, what scientists say is if that experiment had gone on longer than the 7 years that it went on for, it would have overtaken the world within a decade. That's amazing to think about how one man takes a handful of kernels, says that this is set apart as my tithe, and Lord, you said in your word to prove you now herewith if you won't open the windows of heaven and pour out a blessing we don't have room to contain. And not only did God do it, because his word works and he always honors his word, but it was done so on a national scale where not only did this harvest of kernels of wheat explode, but they were able to feed those who were in need with it. They were able to disperse it to nearby communities. People throughout the entire United States of America not only saw what the tithe produced, but they lived out exactly what happened with the promise and the tithe. The windows of heaven supernaturally opened up a supply and supernaturally produced a harvest beyond human comprehension. None of that harvest was lost to blight or drought or anything else that was going on in that time, meaning the Lord rebuked the devourer out of that harvest. And third, all nations, people worldwide, read newspapers, saw video of this. You can go on YouTube and watch an entire hour-long documentary on Farmer Perry Hayden's dynamic kernels. That's exactly what it's called. and you will see just all the footage and Henry Ford himself being moved to tears, seeing the way that God was supernaturally showing that his word was real through this experiment. Why? Because you can get at a lot of people with the word, and you can get at a lot of people with miracles. But if you want to touch people in the financial realm that are hard hearted towards anything besides money, show them what God can do with your money by letting Him bless what you tithe on. And I promise you that 90% always goes way further than it ever could than if you'd kept the entire 100. Because I would rather have a blessed 90% than have a inoperative 100% of the money. So I love you guys. We'll be back again tomorrow. We're going to get into offerings tomorrow, so I want you to be prepared for that. And I would encourage you, go back and watch this video several times over so you can get the principles of the tithe down and put it to work in your life. Don't just hear me. Don't just hear what happened to Farmer Perry Hayden. Don't just go through the Bible and see where other people got blessed by the tithe. Get in there, put your money in where your heart is, and watch what God will do when you prove Him with the tithe in your finances. Love you guys. I'll see you again tomorrow. And until then, you have the best day in Jesus' name. Bye-bye.